Hey, welcome back to Gold's Garage, and thank you for everyone that followed me through the uh, issues we had with thrust bearings on the 4.7 swap engine. There it is. I've already had it running. I'm just waiting for Daryl to give me a dyno date for it. It runs fine. It's a different engine now, and we're going to actually make a little separate video of it running, so I won't go into any more detail than that. But my main point is thanks for all the support in the comments. You know, we never like to show our mistakes, uh, show our dirty laundry, so to speak. And it was Alex's idea when we didn't have a video showing the dyno test. What are we going to do? So we showed you guys exactly what happened. And the outcome was very positive because if I hadn't done that, we wouldn't have got comments from guys like Brian Salter and yada yada that inspired me to dig a little deeper, and we found the cause of the problem, which was the dyno installation. And Daryl is going to do, next time we go to the dyno, which will be soon, demo about how the engine is installed on the dyno for you and how it's easy to get it installed in a way that it puts the thrust on the force on the thrust bearing, and how all things kind of went wrong. So we're going to fix all that. So anyway, what are we going to do today? We're back. Now we're moving on to Tony's 302. And Tony Guzzo, great customer, has been very patient with us. He brought me this 302 back in March. And Robert sent us, his buddy, brought me another 302 back in March. And right now we don't have a block for that one. We're looking for our MO block, by the way. If anybody knows, has a lead on one, let us know. We have everything else we need. Anyway, he wanted a high-end build, so this block's had everything. It's been line board. The only thing we can't do to it is deck it, because the information on the deck, on the pad here, is very important to an original restoration, and we had to keep that. But we did everything else we could to this engine, and I've had the short block together for 3 months or so, and waiting on a camshaft. So we ordered a camshaft, a solid lifter camshaft that Tony selected. It's comp CAMS, kind of a retro cam, but better than the original 302 cam. And we'll put the specs up for it. The short block's been together for more than 3 months, and the cam's been ordered for more than 3 months. We ordered the cam, nitrided. We also ordered tool steel valve lifters, and Comp hasn't delivered the cam. They can't tell us when they're going to deliver the cam. Apparently the equipment that they use to do the nitriding is broken down and they haven't got it fixed or don't have a solution. Even though they can't deliver the cam, they won't let us cancel it. So next time we're looking for a cam, we'll look every place except Comp before we get to that point. But in this case, what we did do, Tony took the initiative and ordered exactly the same cam and lifter kit. I guess he got it through Summit, had it delivered here, not nitrided, just the original condition. And it should be fine. One of the things we're going to do, and as startup, I've made videos about startup with new cam. This is a solid lifter cam, a little bit different. But one of the big issues, I think, on camshaft failure on startup is too much valve spring pressure. So what I've done in this case, we have the correct Howard's valve springs here, which are 110, 280 at 500 lift. And they are not in the engine because what I did, I used valve springs out of Trevor's 602 crate engine that we're using in his super stock car, and they're only 80 pounds on the seat and less than 200 pounds, around 200 pounds wide open. So one of the big issues I think that takes out cams initially, and the procedure to start it up is important, but it's too much valve spring pressure. So we will start this engine and run it with these valve springs, and when the cam's broken in, I'll change the valve springs and put the correct valve springs on. So a little bit more about the engine. It's going to be not quite 11 to 1, it's going to be a little over 10 to 1 compression. One of the issues is because you can't deck the block, and picking up more compression. The 302, difficult to get compression because compression ratio, the numerator is the volume of the engine and the denominator is the volume of the combustion chamber. When the volume of the engine is small, you need a small combustion chamber volume. So for that reason, we're just over a 10-to-1 compression ratio. And once again, we are using a Felpro multi-layer steel head gasket. Because we're on the stock head for sealing, we figure we better do that. So, however, the heads have been flowed by Bill Little, the very best in the business. We're lucky to have Bill available. So if you've seen these are the original, as they call, double bump or fuel injection heads that 302s use. These are the correct original heads for this engine. All the numbers in this engine match. It's a detailed numbers matching restoration. We had the heads flowed by Bill Little. So these heads flow typically about 200 CFM on the intake and about, I'm not sure the exhaust number, usually about 75% of that, so 150 CFM, something like that, stock. And Bill ported and flow bench these heads. We will put a snapshot of the flow bench report up, and got more than 250 CFM on the intake and right around 200 CFM on the exhaust. So I think that's about as good as you're going to get with double bump heads, and the camshaft specs we'll put up as well. So anyway, installing the cam, so you would think, what can go wrong? You got a original engine, you got a solid lifter cam, just like the original, a little bit different specs. We're actually using the stock rocker arms. So I'll show that. The original rocker arm for almost all small block Chevs has a little triangle in this spot. And the ones with the 0 in them are long slot high performance rocker arms that were only used, I think they were only used on the solid lifter cam engines, the high performance engines. So Tony wants to use those. We could use roller rockers, but he wants this thing that's authentic. Even the crankshaft is the original crankshaft. We have eagle rods and Keith Black pistons, but the crankshaft is original. And so the rocker arms we're going to use are the stock rocker arms. So we have to check all the geometry out. We're going to check the push rod length, rocker arm ratio, piston to valve clearance, all that kind of stuff, and go through that whole process. So stick with us. You would think that, you know, this should just be pretty straightforward, but we ran into a whole bunch of things that, one of the things, the heads have been milled for push rod guide plates and studs. That's a good thing to do, but it created a problem as well, and we're going to show you how we solve that. So stick with us. Oh, we're going to show checking piston to valve clearance, and we're making some of these clips out of sequence, but we'll try to put them together for you so that they do make sense. But obviously the cam is already in. You'll notice I just got a couple of ordinary cam bolts in there, and just to show you what we will use on the final install. And you don't have to do this, but this is a nice little kit from All Star. These are grade 8 bolts, and when you get the cam bolts in, you bend these little tabs over, and that gives you comfort when you're trying to sleep at night that your bolts are not going to come loose. Now, typically when I install a cam, this is just mocked up right now, I would put Loctite blue on these bolts, and then you torque them to 20 foot-pounds. And even without this, it's kind of like belt and suspenders. If you do all that, you probably don't need this, but we're going to use it. It's not a very expensive piece, and this gives us the comfort of knowing. I've never had a cam bolt come loose in my life, but just want to explain why we just got these two mocked up bolts. So checking piston to valve clearance, why is that important? And it's important because if you float your valves, in other words, at high RPM, the valve's not following the camshaft anymore, and it's hanging out there in midair, and the piston comes up and hits it, you're going to have a bad day because it'll completely destroy your engine. And I've had that one experience. I had it, my 302 and my Z28. I did exactly that at 6,600 RPM in high gear, and broke the block, broke connecting rods, broke pistons, made a big mess. So don't let that happen to you. So you always should check piston to valve clearance. Now, before I go into doing that, typically in street cams, if you're using a stock camshaft or even a high performance camshaft in the range of, 250 degrees at 50 and 500 lift or so, even up to 550 lift, probably not a problem, but you should check it. And the other thing is, don't float your valves, but it can happen. And so you have to make sure that you have a clearance. So what that means is, even if the valve's hanging down there, the piston's not going to hit it. So that's why we do that. So how I do that, if Alec wants to come in here, I got it mocked up for you. So for this purpose of doing this, we use these setup springs. So they're nice and light, so it's easy to push on them, okay, like that. And which would be difficult, obviously, if you had the stock springs. And I got a dial indicator set up on this one. So one of the things you have to note is that you need to check that in the overlap cycle. And what's going on in the overlap cycle? The intake valve is starting to open and the exhaust valve is closing. And that happens right at top dead center. And that happens when the dot is at the bottom. There's the dot that you use to set up, and when you line up your camshaft when you first install it. And when that dot's at the top, you're at firing, combustion firing, top dead center at the firing part of the cycle. And the dot's at the bottom, you're at the overlap. So we're at the overlap now. And so what I'm going to do is zero the dial indicator. So we know that the valve is already, if you look under here, you can see the valves are active. The intake valve, once again, that's the intake valve. It's starting to open at top dead center. And so if we push down, we'll see how much clearance we have piston to valve. Now, before I even do that, the ideal way, one of the other ways anyway, ideal way too, is to put clay on top of the piston, install everything, put two valves in, rotate the engine, and then you measure how thick the clay is after you do that. But I can't do that because the heads are already on this engine. And typically I always like to install the cam before the crankshaft's even in the engine. But in this case, I had to get this thing together. The camshaft came late, so we have to do what we have to do. And if you're installing a cam when the engine's already together, this is the way you have to do it. So all I'm going to do here now is, because these are nice light springs, watch the dial indicator and push down on the dial indicator. There's 1, 2, almost 300 thousandths of piston to valve clearance. So that is a ton. 100 thousandths, 120 thousandths would be probably a safe number. Now, I am checking it right at top dead center. Ideally, you should start about 10 degrees before top dead center, and you do the same thing with the exhaust valve. The exhaust valve is closing, the intake valve is opening. And actually the minimum clearance occurs around 10 degrees before and 10 degrees after for the intake and exhaust valve respectively. But because I've got over 250 thousandths of clearance, it's not going to be a problem, right? But if you're close, if you're at 100 thousandths, then you better check it through the whole range and check both the intake and exhaust valve. When you retard or advance your camshaft, you also affect that. If you advance your camshaft, you're starting that intake valve to open sooner. So it's going to be open more at top dead center. So you have to make sure you check all that. But once again, because I've already got so much piston to valve clearance, this cam has got 500 thousandths lift total. And I think it's 500 minus the, because it's a solid lifter cam, there's valve lash minus the valve lash. So not even close. But if you're putting a really big cam in, you need to check that. You need to make sure that if you float your valves, your piston's not going to touch your valve. Otherwise, you're going to have a really bad day. So hope that helps. That's one of the things. We're also going to do rocker arm ratio. Check rocker arm geometry and push rod length. Stick with us. Okay, welcome back. In this clip, we're going to actually install the cam. And For what it's worth, I've had a couple of different cams in this engine already. We used Tony's engine to do a couple things in a previous video showing installing camshaft and timing gears and all that. And what we were able to do by doing that was to validate top dead center, because now the heads are on the engine. So typically I like to put the cam in the engine first before there's even a crankshaft in it. Then install the crankshaft, one piston with no rings, number one cylinder, piston only. And that's an ideal way to degree your camshaft before you even put the cylinder head on. But as I mentioned before, we waited 3 months to get the cam. We had to get going, so the heads are on. But you can still do it and do it correctly another way. So one of the things typically that you have to do is to determine where top dead center is. And I'm looking around because I have a tool for that. Here it is. So when the cylinder heads are on, before you degree anything, you have to make sure that your timing mark's at top dead center. So this is a tool you can use. It screws in like a spark plug and it's adjustable. And the idea is you bring your piston up gently until it touches this on one side, then rotate it until it hits gently coming the other side with your degree wheel, and halfway in between is top dead center. However, in this case, because we have already degreed camshafts in Tony's engine, even though it wasn't Tony's camshaft, we have validated that the timing mark on Tony's original harmonic balancer is perfect. It was right on top dead center. So now when I go to degree this cam, I will put the damper back on, the balancer back on, use that as my top dead center mark, because I've already validated that it is top dead center. However, if you haven't got that, you either have to determine it with your degree wheel and a dial indicator with your piston coming up, or if the heads are on, you have to use this. So just trying to cover off a couple different scenarios for you. So we're going to put the cam in. One of the things I do usually and almost all the time is I spray the cam with dry graphite lube. And I've already done Tony's camshaft. That's why it's all kind of dark and black looking. And this lube is made for any moving part, any wearing part for initial break-in. Doesn't have to be a camshaft. Does it help? I'm not sure. Does it hurt? I'm sure it doesn't hurt. And maybe it helps. And we always try to do everything we can do to make sure, especially when we're dealing with camshafts, as I said before, you have to be perfect. You're not going to get away with anything, so you do everything that you can. So the cam is almost ready to install, but this, backing up a little bit, we pulled the cam specs out, and I'm going to read the specs of this cam to you. And one of the things I always say, read all the instructions when you do anything. Don't wait till you got it installed and then read the instructions. Do it first. Unfortunately, one of the problems nowadays, the instructions are helpful, but they used to be written by engineers and mechanics, and now they're written by lawyers. And the point of writing them is to make sure that if something goes wrong, you're going to think it's your fault and not their fault. And they do everything they can to evade any accountability, unfortunately, and especially when it comes to camshafts. So, so you're on your own, because if something goes wrong, you're not likely going to get warranty, and there's a pretty good chance that it's not their fault too. That's the other possibility. So anyway, this cam, Tony picked this cam. It's a solid lifter cam. I mentioned before, we've had the heads ported by Bill Little. We've got over 250 CFM on the intake and almost 200 CFM on the exhaust. Really nice numbers for a stock. These are called the fuelie heads or double bump heads. They are the 291 castings. Yeah, the 291 casting, I had to read it off there. So there's a couple different casting numbers. These are the 291 castings. So the cam that Tony picked, I mentioned in other clips, we wanted it nitrided. This one's not nitrided, and I've already explained what happened to there. So the gross lift is 504 on the intake and 498 on the exhaust, and 247, 254 at 50. So it's a radical, pretty radical cam. and we only have a 302 cubic inch engine. So this engine's going to have to go 7,000 RPM to make power. And typically the original 302s went 7,000 RPM. So you don't have a lot of torque, and you're going to have to go lots of RPM. Tony has his Z28 Camaro, looks exactly like mine. And he has a 456 gear in it already, so that is the right gear if you're going to use a cam. If you're going to use lots of camshaft, you need some way to multiply your torque at low speed, and the 456 gear is the answer. So those are the specs on the cam. We'll put a screenshot of that up. It's going to be a nice cam. It's still a solid lifter cam. Those numbers I gave you were gross numbers before valve lash. I'll have to look up and see the valve lash, probably around 20 or 30 thou, something like that. So the actual valve lift is whatever the gross lift minus the lash, right? So we'll put a spec sheet up on that. So before I put the cam in, just something else to show. We're trying to show as much stuff as we can. So I got the checking springs on here, and in a separate clip we showed checking piston to valve clearance. Whenever you're changing valve springs, what we do is hook up our air chuck to here, get the piston at top dead center, put air in the cylinder, and that holds the valve up to make sure if your piston's at the bottom and you unhook the retainer from the valve could theoretically fall into the cylinder, and then you got a lot of work to do. So always use compressed air to hold your valve up when you're doing that. So every time I put a camshaft in, it reminds me of the first time I put a camshaft in. So I'm going to tell you a little story. I hope you find it a bit interesting. So I installed my first cam when I was 17 years old, and fortunately I worked at a service station. I got a job at a Texaco service station when I was 15. And one of the perks of working at a garage is that you got access to the garage, tools, equipment, a hoist, a whole bunch of other stuff. And the only issue was you couldn't use it when the garage was open. You had to do it when the garage was closed. So typically we would work till 9 o'clock at night, turn the lights off, turn the pumps off, and get to work on our own car. And it had to be running by the morning because the garage is going to open again. So that's how my first cam got changed. So I had a 62 Chev bubble top that I'd already converted from a 283 automatic to a 327 4-speed car. But the 327 was out of a 66 Chevelle, and it was a 275 horse 327. So I wanted to put an L79 cam in it. Still one of my favorite cams. The L79 is the 350 horse 327 cam that was used in Corvettes, Novas, Chevelles. Back in the day, very, very popular cam, and it's still a good cam. Gary Watson's engine, one of the first engines that I dynoed, had that cam in it, and it worked very well. So anyway, I knew there was a cam in there somewhere, and so I just started taking it apart until I found it. And it's interesting, I'm telling this story because sometimes you don't know what you don't know, and back in the day it seems we got away with all kinds of stuff just because we didn't know any better. So disassembling the engine, we got the cam out. What I didn't realize before that was to get the timing cover off, you have to drop the oil pan. And if you're changing your camshaft in a car, if the engine's in the car, that's tricky to do, but the timing cover has to go on before the oil pan gets tightened up. So you have to drop the oil pan. I didn't know that. I somehow got that cover off and back on, and yeah, it leaked a little bit, but I was happy with that. But now that I know that, and I'm telling you that for a reason, if you're changing the cam in an engine, when the engine's in the car, you got to drop the oil pan a little bit to get the timing cover off so you can get the cam shaft out. So the other thing is, I put this L79 cam in, it's a hydraulic cam. Nowadays, best practice is we never ever install a cam unless we install brand new lifters with it. You never reuse lifters, even if you're reusing lifters with the same cam it was born with. You organize them in an organizer and install them in exactly the same order that they come out. So number one lifter still on number one lobe, etc. And therefore nothing really changes. Well, we didn't know that back then. So we took all the lifters out, put them in a pile somewhere in the shop, got the cam out, put the old lifters on top of the new cam, and you know what? It ran fine. And I had that car for at least a year after that and never had an issue. And the L79 cam made a nice improvement in performance. So little anecdote, but there's learning lessons along the way with that stuff. That's not what I suggest you do today. Best practice today is you don't install a new cam with used lifters. And in this case, it's a solid lifter cam. So obviously we're going to install it that way and go through all the process. So let's get the cam in. So I've already mentioned that I coated it with plastic coat and hope it helps. So what else do we have to do? I have comp cams lube, and of course there's all kinds of warnings. If you don't use comp cams lube, if you use anybody else's lube, the warranty is void. So does that make any sense? It probably does to comp cams, I guess. But so we're going to use comp cams lube on the lobes, and at the same time we're just going to use oil on the lobe, on the journal. So we'll go over here, spray a little oil in the journal. You don't need break-in oil or anything on the journal. I'm starting at the wrong end of the cam, unfortunately. I start at the right end of the cam, part that goes in first. So we just put some oil on that. There's oil already on the cam bearings. I've already had cams in this engine before. Okay, and then we're going to get our comp cams lube out. The gear that drives your distributor should have some on too. It's a little bit of a messy job, but that's just the way it is. And then the lobes. And we'll also put, when I put the lifters in, we'll coat the lifters as well, just to make sure that they get lots of lube on them. And we'll go down to that. And once the cam is partly installed, we'll get at the other lobes. So comp, if you're watching, we're using your lube. And for leverage, I just use this long bolt. You can actually buy a custom-made tool for that. You need some way to lever it. I think I mentioned before, my preference is always to install the camshaft first before the crankshaft is even in. The engine's upside down, and you can actually hold the camshaft from the other end and guide it in. But for reasons I already mentioned, the heads are already on, the engine's already together. That's not an option any longer. So we're going to put it in this way. So the main issue is take your time, be gentle, don't force anything, and you shouldn't have any problem. Now, what's going to happen is you have to kind of keep rotating it, because as you go in, the lobes are going to start interfering with your progress. So now that I've got it in this far, it's supported, I'll put a little more lube on these lobes, and on these lobes. Oil on the journal, you don't want that on the journals. Bearing journals, and we just keep working our way out of there. Main thing is just go nice and easy. Keep turning it, and it'll find its way. There it goes, it's coming. So now we can put a little more lube on here. Oh, sorry. You're going to get your hands dirty. It's all part of the experience. And leaving a little bit on that's your fuel pump lobe there, of course, right? So the leverage is going to be becoming important now. My little bolt here helps me. It's going. Keep turning, going slowly. Now is when you need your leverage. There we go. Cam is in. So we're going to stop there. I've got to clean up. We'll come back with the next clip. Okay, the cam's in. No issues there. We're happy with that. Now we're going to install the timing gear. This is a Cloy's double roll timing chain gear set. It's a deluxe set with the Torrington bearing in the back of it. So that bearing pushes on that surface. When your engine is operating, the geometry of the lifter and the lobe of the cam wants to push the cam to the back of the engine. So there's always a bit of a thrust on that surface. 99% of all small block Chevs running around don't have a Torrington bearing, but it is a nice upgrade, and that takes away that friction between the two surfaces. So I've already pre-oiled the little Torrington bearing. So now we've got to get the gear on. Take my install piece out. One of the issues is getting the exact location. Okay. So the dowel on the camshaft, I've tried to put it in a position where it is pretty close anyway. That's critical to getting it lined up first. It's a little bit tricky and it might take time. And so we need to be dot to dot. So dot to dot can be at the bottom. There's a dot. Obviously I've got the crank gear. This camshaft's installed straight up, by the way. It's not advanced or retarded. And you put that mark on when I put the timing gear on. I think we showed that in previous videos. Installing the timing gear. I usually heat it up in my easy bake oven so it goes on easily. So that's pointing straight up. I got that dot and this dot, and now the trick is I got to get, and just to give you a little warning, when I installed this, the fit between this dowel and the hole in the gear is really, really tight, so it makes it a little bit tricky to put on. I've had this on already, so I'm trying to get the dots lined up. I got to get a bolt. This is not the bolt I'm going to finally install it. This is enough to get it started. So I'll put my bolt down there. And the trick is to get chain like that. Where is that thing? And I'm going to have to turn the cam a little bit. I have to fix that. Actually, we made a similar video a while ago, and I got lucky that day. It went really well. There we go. Once you get one bolt in, you know you got it. So what I will do is tighten that up. Second one in. Just using these ones because they're easy to get started and easy to work with. So there we go. Okay, so we got dot to dot. So to verify that, it's a safe thing to do, a good thing to do, is rotate the engine through the complete cycle. I think I mentioned this in the previous part of the video. When you're dot to dot at the bottom, you're actually in the overlap cycle. Your number 1 piston and number 6 piston are both at top dead center. Number 6 is actually firing, and number 1 is in the overlap cycle. So now we rotate it around, and another way to do that is take a straight edge. I'll grab that. Just showing you some different ways you can do it or verify it. If you run your straight edge from that dot through the center line of the camshaft, it also goes through the center line of this dot. So you're pretty sure you got it in the If you don't, your timing is going to be off by whatever number of teeth you have divided into 360, probably about 10 degrees, something like that, and you're going to have an engine that doesn't run very well. So we're going to come back around again and verify we have dot to dot. Okay? So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to install this because this is going to be the camshaft's not coming out again. So we're going to install the kit that I had to bolt this on and put the balancer back on and degree the camshaft. Please remember to like and subscribe. I don't know why I can never remember to say that, but if I didn't have Alex here, I'd probably never say it. He reminds me by going like this. So please remember to like and subscribe, share. If you do that, YouTube thinks this is an interesting video, that somebody likes it, and they're going to show it to more guys. And our subscribers are working on, we have over 19,000, so the next milestone is 20,000, and you can help us get there. I mentioned already, we're going to install a little all-star cam gear install kit. It's a nice thing to do. You don't really have to. There's other ways. Typically, though, I do cam bolts. I do use a little bit of blue Loctite, which is removable, and I've already done this. Clean the threads off to make sure the threads are nice and dry. There's no threads. Bolts are all here in the camshaft as well, and put a little blue Loctite on them, and then we bend these little tabs over. So let's get that going. So get my blue Loctite on here. I'll put the other bolts right there. Don't have to use a lot, just a little bit. Okay. And this camshaft's not coming back out, so that's nice to know. A little blue Loctite here. A little bit. Now, if I didn't use it, would it come loose? No, I'm not worried about that. It's just kind of one of those things you get used to doing. Torque is what keeps bolts tight. We're going to torque this to 20 foot-pounds, and that's the right torque for a 5/16 bolt, and that's what keeps bolts tight. So it's kind of like belt and suspenders. I already mentioned that. So but it does, there's no way this bolt's going to loosen off with this little kit, that's for sure. And we had to get right bolts anyways, so might as well do it that way. So my torque wrench set at 20 foot-pounds. Okay, and we'll go around one more time just to make us feel good about it. There we go. And now we bend those little tabs down. So that's the cam installed. Okay, next up is getting the timing cover back on, because I have to install the balancer. If you didn't pick it up in the previous part of the video, I validated top dead center is accurate on Tony's original balancer and this timing cover, so I can use that for top dead center when I degree his camshaft. So that's important. So I need to get it back on, and it's not coming off again this time. So going back to 1966 or whatever, when I did my first one, I didn't do this, and I damaged the gasket. So we need to get this timing cover back on with the oil pan pulled out of the way. Okay, now the oil pan can come up, and we'll put some sealant on the corners, just on the corners of the oil pan, before we bolt it up. But the balancer has to go on before we can put the cover has to go on before we put the balancer on. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We're back, and while Alec was gone, I don't know, he's got other things to do in his life. I'm going to have to put him on full salary, I guess, if I want to keep him here. But he had to go, so This is a few hours later, and we're trying to put together a good video for you. Everything might not be in the perfect sequence. We're doing our best. So anyways, well, Alec was gone. I got the timing cover on and torque to spec. There's a torque specification. I use 100 inch-pounds. That's only 1/4 inch bolts. There's a gasket under here. Little wee bit of Permatex on both sides of the gasket. It's a good idea. Pretty sure you're not going to leak. And then I got the oil pan bolted up as well. This is, once again, you can't put the oil pan on until the timing cover's on. So now the timing cover's on, and I put a little bit of Permatex right in that corner there. That's the most likely place if you're going to get a leak. One of the things that's not OEM, we use the new quality, I guess it's neoprene or whatever, oil pan gasket, which are a lot nicer. They do not leak. The original gaskets are disc cork, and they are problematic, and they use more Permatex than they're worth to seal them. So anyway, ready to go ahead with, we're set up here to check out the camshaft, and so we're going to do that. So the next thing is, I'm going to show you something else here. On the inside of the balancer, a lot of old balancers get worn out where the seal, there's a seal right down here, and they get worn out, and even if you put a new seal in, it's still going to leak. And so typically I look at that and say, okay, if there's a groove in there, there's a little sleeve that can go on there to make a new sealing surface. Well, there already is a sleeve on here. And whoever put it on, I would have put it on the other way around. But anyway, it's fine. You can see the dark mark where the seal runs. But underneath that, if you have an old balancer, the engine's run lots of miles, it'll wear a groove in and cause a leak. So it's basically already been, that problem's already been solved. So I've already put a little bit of oil on the balancer, a little bit of oil on the crankshaft, and we're going to get that together and get started. Okay, so we have a tool for everything. So one of the things to note with this, typically small block Chevs have a 7/16 balancer bolt. When they had the crankshaft repaired and worked on by Atchison's, they increased that to a 1/2 inch bolt. I don't know whether the original threads weren't good or whatever, but we now have a 1/2 inch bolt. So my tool has 1/2 inch on this side and 7/16 on that side. So we start by engaging the tool into the crankshaft, like so. And the other way of putting this on is hammering it on. I don't recommend you ever do that. If you don't have a tool, pretty sure a lot of auto parts places can loan you one or rent you one. Probably loan it to you if you know them well enough. And that is the right way to do that. So we just use our 5/8 at one end to hold it from turning. And by the way, we put this in so it's not, we back it off a little bit so it doesn't get stuck in there. And you know, I've showed this stuff before, but that's part of the process we're using today. Put this balancer on. It's pulling in pretty easy. Sometimes they're harder. Depends on the fit on the crankshaft, of course. Got my little towel there. And it'll tell you when it's there. Now, take the tool back out, and we're good to go. Now, I mentioned on the previous clip, if you didn't get that, I'll repeat it. I made a video a while ago, and I used Tony's engine. And I did it for a reason, because what I did, one of the things you have to do is make sure you know where top dead center is. So by using Tony's engine, I validated that his timing mark is perfectly aligned with top dead center. So now, because typically if you degree a cam, you would want the head off, cylinder head off, so you can validate perfectly top dead center. I know that Tony's harmonic balancer timing mark is perfectly lined up with top dead center. So we're going to install that. Hey, welcome back to the continuation of Tony Guzzo's 302 build. And so this is Tuesday morning. The last clip was Monday afternoon. A lot of things have happened since then. Tony gave me a call, and we had ordered originally a nitride cam, never going to get here from comp. So he ordered a regular same cam. It's a 12-673-4 solid lifter, Nostalgia 3030 comp cam. It's 504 in the intake, 4988 on the exhaust, and the valve lash is 12 thou. So one of the reasons they called the other cams 3030 is because the valve lash was 30 thou, but these aren't, they're 12 thou. And this is 247, 254 at 50. So it's got lots of duration, not a ton of lift, but lots of duration. And so while I'm looking at the cam card yesterday, in the last clip we were just going to degree the cam. I picked up the cam card. Most important number on the cam card is the location of the intake center line, and that's what you use to degree the cam. So this one says intake center line at, and it's blank. There's absolutely no, we'll put a screenshot of it up. Maybe I'll just show it to you quickly. You can look at it yourself. There's no number in there. So if you're interested in building engines, these are the kind of frustrations that you run into. So I need to know that because I'm going to degree it, right? And where is the intake center line? So typically intake center lines are somewhere between 110 and 106 degrees. If you have 110 degree lobe separation and your cam's not advanced, it's going to be 110. If your cam's advanced 4 degrees, it's going to be 106. In this case, the lobe separation is 112. So the actual number is 108. How did I find that out? Well, I called comp, and they were very busy that day because I was on the phone listening to elevator music for more than a half an hour. And I finally gave up on that. Mike found it online for me, and the intake center line we know now is 108 degrees. That's what we're shooting for. So the next thing that happened, so Alex, my hockey buddy, he played hockey this morning. I didn't because I want to get this done. Tony wants to pick up this engine on Thursday. He has a short window of time to pick it up, and for that reason it's probably not going to get dynoed as we speak right now. So I had to get the rest of the stuff together. So in the previous clip I showed the dilemma I had using the guide plates, and I think the last thing I said was I was going to chamfer the holes where the rocker arm studs go in and not use the guide plates, and I decided against that. The lesser of evils was using the guide plates, but I had to take every one out at a time, install it on my vise, get my zip cut out, and modify it to get enough clearance so the push rods can turn. I probably had every one of them in and out multiple times to accomplish that. It was a frustrating, time-consuming job. I don't like grinding and welding in my shop. But that's part of life, guys. And then the other thing that happens is, I mentioned before, when I go to set the valves, these are Tony's original stamp 0 high-performance rocker arms from GM. So I go to set the valves at 12 thousandths, and these are Tony's polylocks. The polylock runs out of thread, so I got to use washers or shims under the polylock bolt in order to be able to set the valves properly. So a lot of fooling around. It takes time and costs money, and on anything custom like this, that's kind of the things that you run into. One other thing we wanted to mention, we went to put the balancer bolt in that we got from Atchison's yesterday, it was too long, so it's going to run out of thread. I shimmed it back just to get the job done. So I actually happen to have this in stock. Just to give you an idea how the cost of things runs up. I bought this from Amazon, $49.45 plus tax. That's a grade 8 bolt. It is the right length. I will use it on the final install. But for one bolt, $49, guys. So that's the kind of stuff that you run into. So I think I covered that off. I'm pretty happy we spent lots of time getting the valves adjusted. You know, when you adjust solid lifter valves, it's a little different than hydraulics. You use a feeler gauge in here. I still got it out. It's only 12/1000ths of an inch. So on any, I haven't done a solid one for a long time. So I use basically the feeler gauge fits in there like that, and then you got to lock down. It's just a nice snug fit. Now what's going to happen, the specified clearance is 12 thou. I've set it at a tight 12 thou because as it heats, it's going to actually grow a little bit, probably 2 or 3 thou. It'll open up a little bit. And all this is coming back off because after I break in the cam, these valve springs are coming out. I'm going to replace these startup valve springs. I mentioned already, they only have 200 pounds open. When you're talking about valve springs for a break-in, you want to know the force when the valve is open. It doesn't really matter when it's closed because that's not where the maximum force is. It's going to be where it's open. So these valve springs are only about 200 pounds. So when the valve is open. So that's about as easy a life as we can give a camshaft. So those are kind of some of the frustrations that you run into. So now that I know I'm looking for a 108 center line, we're going to degree the cam for you. So I got it set up here. So we're just doing this for demonstration. I've already done it. Obviously it's back together. So the other thing is, we mentioned already, what's this air hose for? When we took these, I took the test springs out and put them away already, put the regular valve springs back in. So you need to have your cylinder at top dead center. Compressed air holds the valves closed while you're doing that, and then you can compress and get your valve springs changed. So we need to find out now where the center line of this cam is. So let's get started at that. So what I'm going to do, the cam is more than 300 thousandths lift, about 330 or 40 thousandths lift on the lobe. So I'm going to go to 300 on the way up, 300 on the way down, take a reading, add them up, divide by 2, and that's where the center line of the camshaft is. So we're at 0 right now. It's not traveling. Okay, here we go. So we're going to go to 300 thousandths on the way up. Here we go. 1, 2, 300 thousandths on the way up, and that is 65 degrees. Okay, and we're going to go all the way up to the maximum lift, back down to 300 thousandths, and that is it's 135, 145, 148. So 5 and 8 is 13, 64 is 10, 1 is 11, 213, 106.5. So the center line is supposed to be, at 108. So on that reading, we're 1.5 degrees off. The minimum that you can move it is 2 degrees. So we're going to obviously leave it at that and call it a day as far as the location of the cam is go. I put the cam gear, it's got multi adjustments on it. I put it in on center line, so magnitude of error 1 degree or 2 degrees, 106.5 is close enough for us. So the next thing we're going to do now that we've got that done is prime the oil system. So Not going to go through the entire process, but here's the oil that I typically use for startup, Lucas break-in oil. You can get it in 30 and you can get it in, I think, 2050 as well. I typically use 30 for startup. It's readily available. I get it. My APC is my go-to store. I'm a dealer there in Ontario, and for that reason I get it from them. And you can also get it on Amazon. It works pretty good. We will actually do 2 oil changes, one initial break-in the cam. We have our little Moroso screen in the oil filter. After the cam is broken in, we'll drop all that oil out, check the Moroso screen, change the filter, put a new fill of oil, and that'll be what Tony's going to go away with for the initial use of his engine. So let's just give it a drink here. Going to take the full, this is 4.73 liters, so that's pretty much what it's going to take. Got our pressure gauge set up here and drills in place, so let's see if we can get oil pressure. So okay, while we were on break there, what we're doing is using a drill to get oil pressure, and as you can see, looks like I got to put this rocker arm back on. This is the one that I use for Degreening cam. They're all getting oil up here now. Just to make a point about that, we always put oil in, prime the oil system, make sure we got oil pressure, make sure we got oil coming. Sometimes it takes a long time, and it's a decision call. I used to do them all until every rocker arm was full of oil, and you know, it's probably really not necessary. Once you know you got oil pressure, you got oil up all your lifter valley, you can see it coming out of the lifter valley, you can see it coming out of some rocker arms. It's a tough job to get up that little hole in the push rod, which it has to do. Rotating the engine while you do it frequently helps, but sometimes some engines come really quick and some take a long time. So this one's got most of them now. In fact, everyone, I don't have this rocker arm on, but everyone that the rocker arm on is on this side. I got some on this side that haven't got oil yet, but it's a decision call. Obviously, I put some oil under the rocker arms anyway before we started. It'll get oil pressure once it starts. We got 40, actually with the drill. My drill's having a hard time. And here's one of the issues with using this tool, to show you that. Some guys just use a screwdriver blade. Some guys use an old distributor, which is a great thing to do. You just take the mechanism off the distributor and use the drive part, okay? You take the gear drive part off, use the drive part on the distributor. But if you just use a screwdriver blade, what this boss does, it goes into the oil galley and it blocks the oil galley to force the oil around it. That's what this is for, to get to the front of the engine. If you just use a screwdriver blade, a lot of the oil is just going to come, the pump's going to pump oil, you're probably going to get pressure at your gauge, and it's going to dump right back into the oil pan. That's why these tools, this is a Moroso tool. Every Chevrolet engine except 409 uses this tool. A 409 is different, I have both of them. They're a little shorter, but small block, big block, 283, 454, all use the same tool. And so we're happy enough that we got oil pressure. And we got oil to almost every rocker. A couple of them are still waiting. And so what's next steps? Valves are set. We talked about that. Get the intake manifold on. Get it in the test stand and hopefully get it running today. That's the plan. As I said, Tony wants to come and get this engine. I got to get this cam broken in. Then I got to change all the valve springs, put it back together, run it again, and so on. So that's a job, and hopefully keep our customer happy. Okay, so this video's turning out longer than we planned. We just wanted to show installing the camshaft, but it's going to be long. So we'll call this part 2 of it, and we'll let my editor decide where he's going to cut it up or make one long video or 2 short ones. I'm not sure yet. Anyway, and just trying to explain to you, we're trying to get work done, people available, all that stuff. Now we got a deadline, we got work to do. I was up at this thing at 8 o'clock this morning, getting it ready for my customer. And that's the way it is when you're building engines. This is Tony Guzzo's 302 out of his 68 Camaro. If you've seen pictures of my Camaro in my shop, it looks exactly the same car. The only difference is this is a correct numbers matching all the parts in this engine, the cylinder heads, the block, even the crankshaft are correct original parts, 302 engine. Now some of this stuff for purposes of starting on my startup stand, obviously this distributor is not correct, this carburetor is not correct. Tony has all that at his shop, so he just wants me to get it running, and he'll put that stuff on when he gets it. This is this shop stuff, but he has the correct Collie carburetor, the correct distributor, all that stuff. So everything that I put together and that stays in the engine is correct. Now, little background, Tony brought this engine to me way back in March with all good intentions. He wanted a high-end build. We had a little contest on my YouTube channel even, what camshaft should we use, and we picked, in the end, the 12-673-4 solid lifter. It's a comp CAMS nostalgia flat tappet cam, and to replicate the 3030 sound. And I haven't heard it running without the header, without the mufflers on myself yet, so you're going to hear it at the same time as I am. It's a solid lifter camshaft. The difference is the valve lash is 12 thousandths. And this cam is going to have a 504 thou lift on the intake, 498 on the exhaust. But it's got a lot of duration, 247, 254. So when you have a lot of duration and a small displacement engine, you need to make up your torque. Tony's got a 456 gear in his 68 Camaro, and that's perfect. He'll get past the torque range so fast you won't even notice it. So the cam's in. We've only run this engine for a few minutes. This is actually part of the break-in, but we have a timing issue. Just a little bit more about the engine. We bored it, we line honed it. The only thing we couldn't do is deck it, because the deck, of course, the numbers on the deck are valuable and critical. It's original MO block, and all those numbers are correct for Tony's Camaro, date codes and all that stuff. So could not deck it. Have dome pistons, and still just a little over 10-to-1 compression ratio. With this cam, the range of this cam is up to 6,900 RPM. So we had planned to dyno this engine, and the dyno should have been on October the 3rd. We missed it because we ordered the original cam nitrided more than 3 months ago. Comp couldn't get it, couldn't deliver it. We still don't have it, so Tony went out and bought the same cam unnitrided. There's a whole bunch of history of that on my channel, so I won't repeat it all. So it's a solid lifter cam I mentioned already. Of course, we got Eagle rods in it, KB pistons. These are forged pistons, and that's the original correct intake manifold for this motor, for this 302. And so we had wanted to dyno it. Unfortunately, it looks as if we speak right now. I talked to Tony yesterday. He's got a short window of opportunity. He lives 6 hours from here to get down here and get it, and the window's going to close on Thursday. So he asked, this thing was in pieces yesterday. He asked me to get it together and get it running for him, and he's coming down to get it Thursday. So Tony, this is for you. Your engine is running, come and get it whenever you're ready. So we're going to start it up and let you hear it run. And I haven't heard it run myself. These are like a nostalgia cam, so it should have a pretty nice sound out the headers. Let's see what it sounds like. Unfortunately, I haven't even set the idle yet because we just got it running and we have a short window of time even to make a video. We'll get the idle adjusted. We only had the first cycle of the breaking in the flat tappet camshaft. What I have to do next before Tony does get here, after the cam is broken in, take all the valve springs out. We're going to put the right valve springs in. It's got soft valve springs in it just for startup to make it easy on the camshaft. And if the plan goes as planned, Tony's taking it away. So hope you found that interesting. This one's for you, Tony. And please like and subscribe. Thank you for watching Gold Scratch.